Hello and welcome everyone to MIR's 2013 Mining HR Outlook webinar. I'm Martha Roberts, Director of Research here at MIR, and I'll be hosting you through the webinar today. Before we get started, I just want to do a quick sound check with everyone on the line to make sure that the system's working and you can hear us. So if you could go to your webinar panel, and where it has a little hand, click on the hand space, and then I'll see you raise your hand and I know that you can hear us then. Seeing a couple hands go up, so that's a good sign. All is working on the sound front. Wonderful. Throughout the webinar today, a few logistics things. If you run into any issues or you have a comment or you'd like to say something throughout the webinar, underneath where you just raised your hand, there's a spot where you can go in and type questions. I do have support crew here with me who are going to monitor the questions that come in. We'll probably run the webinar as a webcast more than a web seminar type of webinar. I won't be stopping throughout and seeking your input or participation, but rather if you have a question and it's sort of stopping you from understanding what's going on, we can stop and answer those questions throughout if we need to. Otherwise, we'll just be collecting them as we go, and when the webinar is over, there'll be 5 or 10 minutes at the end for me to take questions from the crowd and clarify anything that you wanted to know as we went along. This is the first in a series of 4 webinars that we've run over, or sorry, this is the last in a series of 4 webinars that we've run over the past 2 weeks. This year, we've organized the webinars by time zone rather than organizing them by regions. And in each webinar, we've presented the overall national outlook for 2013. And where we can, we've injected a bit of short discussion on the issues and some of the forecasting and LMI activities that we have in your time zone area. So again, as we said throughout the presentation, if something burning comes up, use that question pane. It is being monitored, and you know, as we need to, we'll answer questions, but for the most part, we'll be saving those questions for the end. New in this year's forecasts that MIR's produced is a focus on just the national outlook. You've been used to, in other annual forecasts from us, a breakdown of 6 regional groupings of the provinces and territories. We didn't do that this year. We focused mainly on the national outlook because we've added so much new depth and analysis into our forecasting that it would have made the report quite beastly to add all of the regional analysis in. That doesn't mean that we don't do regional analysis, and I'll explain all that in a little bit because we certainly do still do that. What you'll find new in the hiring requirements forecast this year is industry sector breakdown. So we'll give you a little bit more detailed information about what's going on throughout the industry than what we've done before. We still have our occupational forecast for the 66 occupations, and brand new this year is a forecast of available talent. So this complements our hiring requirements forecast and gives a complete picture of where we expect talent to come from over the next 10 years, which then lets us do an occupational gap analysis at the end of the report. So lots of new stuff to talk about and jam-packed full of information. Before we dive into the numbers and the forecast, tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do for those of you on the line who haven't had interactions with us in the past. Mining Industry HR Council, or MIR, is the National HR Council for the Minerals and Metals sector. We're a research hub and a catalyst for solving the HR issues in Canadian mining and mineral exploration. We act as a leader in bringing together the right stakeholders to discuss the issues and find proactive solutions and implement programs that will ensure that the industry's long-term competitiveness and success is maintained. We break the programming areas that we have at the Council down into 3 types of programming. The first, the blue on your left of the screen here, Attraction, Retention, and Transition, focuses on programs that attract the future workforce through promoting mining as a career of choice, and also on programs to encourage diversity and inclusion in the industry. particular program or flagship program in this area is a program that supports workplace readiness training for Aboriginal people called Mining Essentials. If you're interested in the program or any of the programs that I mention as I do this quick overview, certainly let me know. I'll give you email contact information at the end of the webinar, and we'll be happy to put you in touch with the team for each of the programming areas. The second programming area in the middle of your screen in yellow, Skills Learning and Mobility, focuses on activities that ensure the systems are in place for an appropriately skilled and effective and mobile workforce. So under this programming area, we maintain an industry-led worker certification program that's based on industry-defined national occupational standards for 4 key occupations in the industry that were previously unrecognized or undesignated occupations. These 4 occupations that we certify workers for are underground miner, surface miner, mineral process operator, and diamond driller and drill helper. Recently, the numbers coming from the crew are that we've certified over 625 workers in this program, and we're well on our way to reaching our target of 1,000 workers certified by the end of this calendar year. It's an exciting program. There's a lot of enthusiasm in the industry for it, and it's certainly picking up steam. So if you'd like more information on that program, I can certainly put you in touch with the people who can help you out there. The last area of programming, Research for Industry Sustainability, which is the red or maroon red box on your right, is the programming area that brings us together today. This is the programming area where we concentrate on research that provides the information, intelligence, and insight on Canada's mining labor market. So all of the labor market analysis and discussion that we're talking about today. In this programming area, we also have research and information coming out on HR policy and government programs that may be helpful. And we've recently completed a large project that looked very carefully at strategic workforce planning in the industry and developed a number of tools and resources for workforce planning. You can find all of these tools and resources off of MIR's main website, www.mihr.ca. So we are an industry-led organization. We collaborate with a wide spectrum of stakeholders, including employers, education institutions, organized labor, and Aboriginal communities, and other industry associations and groups. So you may be connected with some of those groups and have had contact with us before, and if not, there's a number of ways that you can be involved with the Council. So getting into our forecasting and analysis, we'll start with making sure that we're on the same page in defining the industry and the scope of the industry. So MIR defines the mining industry as including all phases of the mining cycle. So this is everything from staking and claiming and prospecting and exploration through advanced development, extraction, and early downstream mineral processing. We end our scoping of the industry at aluminum fabrication and tool and die making. That gets a little bit farther downstream than where we do our analysis. We also include support services and contractors for exploration and mining, and under this category is where you'll find a number of support services for mineral exploration and advanced development, so construction and drilling crews and those kinds of things. We also include in here closure care and maintenance and environmental support services for the industry. So it's a broad industry definition, and when I say mining throughout the rest of this presentation, I mean all of this, not just the extraction side of the sector. As I said, new this year, we're going to break our forecast down for each of these subsectors. So we'll get some specific details for you on what the labor market looks like in each of these cases. It will be quite familiar to most of you on the phone, I'm sure, that mining activities occur all over Canada, with many projects located in northern and remote locations. And this becomes an important piece of information to keep in mind when we're discussing diversity and inclusion in the industry and Aboriginal engagement and participation. MIR has done recently customized reporting in the north and is in the process of completing reporting in the north to get a better sense of what the mining labor market looks like in that local area. And as you can see here, commodity mix varies greatly by province and territory across Canada. And this is really important in understanding local labor market conditions in a local context. So as the nature of the mining activity is dictated by the type of commodity and the geology in the area, so then is the nature of the workforce needs and the mining activities in the local area. So while in the overall presentation today we're talking about the national forecast generally, I show this context graph to give you a sense that some of this local regional sensitivity can get quite diluted in the forecast when we talk about them on a national scale. So if I'm presenting something that sounds surprising to you or it doesn't sound like it fits in with your local context in your local area, keep in mind that you know, in the Atlantic region, we may well not have the same kinds of trends that we see when we group everything together broadly over the country. We have been, as a group, quite engaged with extensive work to forecast the local labor market in the various provinces and regions across the country. We are sensitive to helping you understand what your local context is all about. So in 2011, we produced a forecast report for Saskatchewan that included all the elements that we're talking about in the national report today. And then in 2012, we produced a report for Yukon and BC that again gave the provincial level and territorial level context. And then in Ontario in 2012 and 2013, we produced 6 regional district level reports in Northern Ontario. So these looked at specifically at census districts in Northern Ontario. This was our first attempt into that regional level analysis, and wildly successful, and some very interesting information came out of those reports. We're looking to do more of those in different regions across the country in the future. So these 9 reports are available on our website, and you know, you can go and download them. If you're having trouble finding them, do let me know, and we'll be very happy to point you in the right direction. So to further develop the local work that we're doing, we're currently engaged in regional analysis in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut. These 2 reports will complement the report that we produced for the Yukon. Will be available sometime in early 2014. We'll also be, throughout the rest of 2014, doing a pan-North analysis of the 3 territories and taking a look at the commonalities and differences that there are in the mining labor market across the north. And then we're hoping to update the forecasts in 2014 that we produced for Saskatchewan. So 2011 was a long time ago, and things have changed since then. So it's time to take another look at the local context. We haven't done local level reporting in Atlantic Canada yet, but we're certainly hoping that that could be on our horizon in the next couple of years. We know that there's a lot of exciting things going on in Atlantic Canada that are changing the face of the mining industry there, and that there are significant pressures with young people and mobility of the workforce and some of the mining activities out west. So we're hoping to do a detailed look at what those mobility pressures are moving forward. So stay tuned for some more information on Atlantic Canada coming out in the near future from us. So as I noted earlier, we're doing a breakdown of the forecast by industry sector. So what we're showing you here is baseline level employment to give you a frame of reference for understanding the numbers that we're talking about in the forecasting throughout the rest of the webinar. So looking at the orange line at the top of this chart in front of you, that shows you the mining industry as a whole. And as of 2012, we were looking at employment of just over 235,000 workers. Breaking this down, the 4 lines underneath show you employment from 2000 to 2012, but 2012 starting point for the different subsectors. So the red line shows you mineral processing and the red line shows you mineral processing activities, and as you can see, there's a slight decline in employment that's happened over the past 10 or 12 years in mineral processing. This is directly in line with some of the activities that we've seen in the industry with some offshoring of mineral processing activities that meant that there are reductions in the workforce in that sector. The light blue line underneath it shows you mining extraction. So employment in mining extraction, as you can see, has been fairly steady over the past decade or so, with maybe a slight increase in overall employment over time. The bottom two lines, the dark blue and the light green color there, kind of blend together a little bit, show you trends in employment in exploration and support services. And as you can see, over the past 10 or 12 years, we've had a steady increase in employment in mineral exploration and support services. And keep in mind that the support services activities we're talking about here mainly are those that support exploration and construction activities. So what we're showing here in these trend lines, there's been a steady increase in employment over time. And that's going to be an important thing to keep in mind when I show you what the projections are for employment in the subsectors moving forward. So with an increase in employment to this degree and combine it with some economic activities, we're going to see a little bit of a decrease in employment moving forward in the projections. I am sure it will come as no surprise to anybody on the phone to learn that there is a strong connection between economic conditions in the mining industry and employment. So what we've plotted here for you in dark blue are changes in employment in the industry over the past few decades. And in orange, we've plotted changes in GDP in mining. So what we're showing, the trend that we're showing you see how the two lines kind of move in a similar pattern over time. That's emphasizing the strong connection between economic conditions and employment. What that means in layman's terms is that when economic conditions are rough, the industry is quick to respond with workforce adjustments that reduce employment. And when economic conditions improve, the industry then makes workforce adjustments to increase employment to match the economic conditions. This is a really, and the other thing that you can see here is the jagged nature of the line shows cyclicality in the industry. So it's a normal thing in our industry to see ups and downs in economic conditions and ups and downs in employment. This relationship between employment and economic conditions is an important relationship, and we use this relationship when we're doing our predictions of future employment in the industry. We use a number of economic indicators when we're looking at economic conditions and doing our forecasting moving forward. One of the key ones that we look at is commodity prices and commodity price forecasts. So in our forecasting exercise, we look at all different commodities that are relevant to the Canadian mining industry. Here I'm showing you gold and silver. We do base metals and iron ore commodity forecasts and the like. So showing you gold and silver, what you can see in the trends from 1990 to 2012, a sharp increase in commodity prices over that period. And what we're seeing right now from 2012 through to about 2016 or so is what we call a commodity price correction. So when you have a sharp increase in commodity prices, it's a natural market trend to then see a commodity price correction happen. This commodity price correction has been forecast to last for a couple of years with a return to growth in commodity prices in the longer-term outlook over the 10-year horizon that we forecast. It's also important to note that the dip in commodity prices is not expected to bring us all the way back to the levels of commodity pricing that we saw in the late 90s and early 2000s. It's just a correction of the pricing at the moment. The reason that I bring this up at this point is it's important to keep in mind that when we're talking about MERS forecasts, under our baseline scenario, we've already accounted for today's economic conditions and some of the downturn activity that we're currently seeing going on in the industry. So the numbers that we're showing you are long-term 10-year projections. keep in mind that our baseline scenario has already accounted for current economic conditions and this cyclical nature of the industry that I showed you in the trend lines with GDP and employment in the graph before. So we encourage you when you're thinking about workforce planning in our industry to think long-term and to try to see past the short-term planning horizon that most of us live within, that 6 month to 1 year cycle, to look at what the trends are overall for the next 10 years. Another thing that we take a close look at in our forecast are key demographic trends in the labor market. So as you can see here, the Canadian mining labor market is aging. So we're showing you the Canadian labor force as a whole, which is also an aging labor force, in dark blue. And then what you can see is that for the 35 to 45, 45 to 54, and the 55 to 64 age categories, mining industry has a higher proportion of workers in those categories than we see in the rest of the Canadian labor market. Another trend in the industry to layer onto this aging workforce is that there's quite a large cohort of the mining industry approaching retirement. Mining workforce is not only more aged than the rest of the Canadian labor market, but also retires a few years younger than we see the Canadian average. So on average, Canadian labor force retirement age is about 62 years old, and in mining we see the workforce retiring at about 59 years old on average. So this creates kind of a perfect storm of conditions that translate into large retirement exits over the next 10 years in the industry. So, you know, between 20 to 30% of the workforce is going to become eligible to retire just in the next couple of years. And this creates a condition for large losses in the sector over the next 10 years that are due to retirement attrition. Another element of demographics that we keep an eye on in our outlooks is diversity in the industry. So we're showing you participation of Aboriginal people, immigrants, and women in this chart in front of you. To the left, if you look at Aboriginal people, you'll see mining in orange in the middle, Canadian labor force in dark blue to the left of that. And to the right, new this year, we did a comparison of participation of these important diversity groups with other resources sectors or our peer sectors. So other industry sectors that have the same mix of occupations and similar types of activities. So we're not just comparing to the overall labor market, we're comparing ourselves to our peers in this graph as well. So as you can see, in terms of engagement of Aboriginal people in mining, we're outperforming the Canadian labor market and we're outperforming our peers. So it looks like a good news story for Aboriginal participation in the industry. However, when we take a closer look at engagement of Aboriginal people in the industry, we see that Aboriginal people tend to be employed in or mainly participating in entry-level positions or production-level positions. So while the mining industry as a whole does a great job of engaging with Aboriginal people, and we outperform the Canadian labor market in terms of participation of Aboriginal people, there's a lot of work still to be done in the industry to encourage Aboriginal participation in education and training that prepares Aboriginal people for other roles in the industry, moving into leadership roles and taking on technician roles or professional engineering roles in the industry. So in the middle, looking at immigrants, and we had a quick question come up about immigrants here, and I'll just pause and clarify. Our definition of immigrants that we're using is the same one that Statistics Canada uses, so that's folks who are new to Canada in the last few years. The mining industry underperforms the rest of the Canadian labor market in terms of engagement of immigrants. This is also true in terms of engagement of women. We wildly underperform the rest of the Canadian labor market in terms of engagement of women. And, you know, we were thinking about this and talking about this as a group. We said, well, maybe what we need to be doing is comparing ourselves to our peers, so other resources sectors who also have activities in northern remote climates and small communities, and you know, have a large occupational mix of heavy equipment and trades type of occupation. And perhaps that might be, you know, some of the reasons why the mining industry isn't as appealing to immigrants and women in terms of finding a career. So we do this comparison of ourselves to our peers. We also find that the mining industry is underperforming other resources sectors. So the message for the mining industry here is that while we've done a great job in engagement of women and immigrants in our sector over the past 10 years, we still have a long way to go in terms of engaging with these demographic groups in our workforce. And immigrants and women and engagement of Aboriginal people in beyond entry-level positions in the industry will become very important solution strategies for the industry moving forward as we try to meet the needs that we're talking about. So keeping in mind the economic trends and the employment trends and the demographic trends that we just talked about, we roll these up into forecasts of hiring requirements and available talent in our industry. So there's three main components to the forecasting exercise that we do. The first is a hiring requirements forecast that looks at the needs that we'll have over the next 10 years. So that's the hiring requirement. We then look at available talent forecasts that predict how many people are going to be available to fill the needs that we're talking about, or the hiring that we're talking about. And finally, we do a gap analysis on an occupational level, which looks at the numbers side by side for each of the occupations that we track for hiring requirements and available talent, and does simple math to take a look at what the gap will be. And then we go deeper into the gap analysis to look at the occupational trends. So we'll start our conversation looking at the hiring requirements. These may be familiar to many of you. We've been forecasting hiring requirements in the industry for several years now, and these remain the same as they've been, with some new developments to the modeling in the background. So what we show you in terms of hiring requirements on the column on your left is a net change in employment in the industry, which is a change in employment due to economic conditions, similar to what I was showing you in the graph earlier. We also show you replacement requirements over the next 10 years due to the demographic profile of the industry. So retirement, replacement, and then all other types of separations and replacements in the industry. This all rolls together into a cumulative hiring requirement. So when we were out in the industry talking to people about, you know, what's the most useful way of presenting information to them, we learned that a hire is a hire to a hiring manager. It doesn't matter whether they're having to find somebody because a new position was created in the company, or there's growth and activity in the company, or if they're hiring someone because of attrition. A hire is a hire. So the most important information to industry employers is understanding what level of effort they're going to have to put forward in terms of hiring people into the industry. We also, in our forecast, look at three different economic scenarios. So the baseline scenario, which is highlighted in white in the graph, in the chart in front of you, assumes a status quo in the industry following the current predictions of economic trends. So I don't mean that it's today's conditions forever moving forward over the next 10 years. It's using those trends that I showed you in the commodity price trends, and a number of other economic indicators over the next 10 years, rolling them together to get an idea of what will happen over the next 10 years. So that baseline scenario assumes the status quo and already accounts for current downticks and a projected return to recovery over time. The expansionary scenario argues with the good folks at the World Bank and says, well, let's say that the economic forecasts that are predicted will be rosier than what we're currently assuming. So that gives us a more positive outlook of economic trends. Whereas the contractionary scenario assumes more of a grim economic outlook and trending in the industry. So the hiring requirements, like I said, are a combination of this employment due to economic conditions and the replacement requirements in the industry, all rolled together into this cumulative hiring requirement. So looking at that baseline scenario, as you can see, we're looking at modest growth in the industry over the next 10 years. Large replacement requirements because of that demographics that we were talking about earlier with that perfect storm of retirement and aging workforce. And also from some competition from other sectors creating some churn in the industry. Rolled together, we're looking at, in that baseline scenario, a need to hire over 145,000 workers over the next 10 years. When you reflect back on the starting point for 2012 for our forecast for employment, it was 235,000 workers currently working in the industry. So even in the contractionary scenario, just above the baseline, where you see the need to hire 116,000 workers over the next 10 years, we're talking about a near half replacement of our current workforce. And the expansionary scenario is even more alarming hiring requirement. So new this year, as I've been saying, we've broken the forecast down by industry sector. So what I'm showing you here are the hiring requirements along with the start level employment in 2013 for each of these. That's showing you the trends in hiring requirements for the different sectors. And as you can see, sort of scanning through the numbers in the columns in front of you, the story slightly changes in each of the sectors. So looking at the top and the bottom two sectors in the chart in front of you, the exploration and the support activities for mining, you see that we're looking at a slight contraction in terms of employment in the industry, or a negative net change in employment due to the economic climate. This probably has something to do with a bit of an employment correction going on. We've had a steady growth in these industries in terms of employment, as I was showing you in that was the dark blue and the green line in the chart a few slides ago. And also a response in the industry to current economic conditions and this slow and steady growth in commodity prices after that. But even though we're talking about a slight contraction in these sectors in terms of new employment growth, what you see is that we still have a significant cumulative hiring requirement, and this has to do with a unique demographic profile in the exploration and support activities for mining, and especially in the exploration side of the industry, where we see an even more aged workforce getting quite set to retire. So even though economic conditions are showing us a slight contraction, we're still looking at significant hiring requirements in those sectors. And as you can see, the mining and quarrying, or the extraction side of the sector, and mineral processing side of the sector follow the same trends that we talked about, with a modest growth in terms of employment that's likely due to some of the new advanced development projects moving forward and some exciting new activities in the industry, and then a significant replacement requirement leading to large hiring requirements forecasts. So keep these numbers in mind, because I'm going to show you similar trends for the subsectors for who's going to be available to fill the positions. We also, in our hiring requirements forecast, do an occupational level analysis. We've been doing this for a while, so you're likely familiar with the table in front of you. We forecast the needs over 66 key occupations in the industry that were defined by industry as essential to a project moving forward, or a site remaining in production. We don't track all of the occupations in the industry, so the second to last column shows you all other occupations. The 66 that we do track cover about 60% of the industry's total workforce. As you can see, when we roll things up into 6 broad occupational categories, for the 66 occupations that we're tracking in terms of hiring requirements, you can see that the largest demands in terms of size of the numbers that we're forecasting are in the trades and production occupations, the line at the top of the chart in front of you. So we're looking at a need to hire over the next 10 years over 47,000 workers in trades and production occupations. This is not a surprising thing to learn that the largest numbers are in trades and production occupations. These are the extraction tends to be the most labor-intensive side of the industry. However, just because a category has smaller numbers doesn't mean that it's a category that is less meaningful to industry hiring managers or less important in terms of attention on those occupations. So if we look at a category, for example, technical occupations or professional and physical science occupations, you can see that the numbers are significantly smaller than what we're forecasting under trades and production occupations. But that doesn't mean that folks in these occupational categories are going to be easy to find. They may take quite a lot longer in terms of education to come through the education system and be educated and ready to start a career in these occupations. And then even a number of years after that to become experienced and have the depth of experience and knowledge in the industry to be fully competent in their roles. So when we talk to workforce planners in the industry, they often tell us that it's not the thousands and tens of thousands of people that we're predicting in trades and production occupations that keep them up at night. It's the few hundred or 1,000 technical and professional and physical science occupations that keep them up at night. Some of these occupations may be that without that individual on site, the entire site will come to a halt. So it's those hard to find and highly skilled and very experienced people that create difficulties for hiring managers and keep them up at night. So that's a broad look at our hiring requirements forecast. There's a lot more depth and detail into it in the report. So if you're looking for more, we'll certainly find a little bit more of that in the report itself. So hiring requirements give us that sense of panic and the shock and awe of a near half replacement of our industry over the next 10 years, assuming this baseline scenario. And it leads us to a natural question of, okay, so we know we need to find all these people. Now, where are we going to find all these people? Where are they going to come from? So new this year, in MERS forecasting, we provide forecasts of available talent. These forecasts are meant to answer the question, where are all these people going to come from? So for each of the 66 occupations, we produce a different forecast. So each forecast is unique to the occupation in question. And we track how many new entrants will come into the labor market in Canada in each of these occupations from a number of different places. So we look at immigration from outside of Canada. We look, when we are on a regional level of analysis, we look at interprovincial mobility, so how are folks moving around the country. We look at who's coming out of the school system and ready to enter into the different occupations. And we look at re-entry into the labor market, into those occupations after leave of absence of some kind. So all of the different sources that come together to provide a new entrant into that occupation. So that's the big red arrow, is showing you that we're tracking new entrants from all of the 66 occupations across all industry sectors. So they haven't chosen their sector of choice at this point. These are just all the new entrants coming in. From there, we do a prediction of how many are going to be available to the mining industry, and we base this on historic trends. So for each of the occupations, the mining industry has an historic trend of being able to attract a person into that occupation when they enter the labor market. So that's your gray arrow. That then rolls together and gives us an indication of what's mining's share of the new talent, the new entrants coming into the labor market in those 66 occupations. So just for an example, if you're thinking about a cook or a financial analyst in the industry, two of the occupations that we do track, you would see that the gray arrow, mining's share of that occupation, is actually quite small. So most of the cooks in the industry tend to go into hospitality industry, not into the mining industry. So when you're coming into the labor market as a cook, you're likely to go towards hospitality and not as likely to go towards mining. So about 1 or 2% of folks coming into the labor market in those occupations end up in the mining industry. For other occupations that are a lot more mining specific, so for example, underground miners, the proportion of folks in that gray arrow who are coming into the mining industry when they enter the labor market is a lot higher. So there'd be more in the neighborhood of 90% of people who enter the Canadian labor market as an underground miner will choose to go into the mining industry. The rest of them work somewhere else with their skills. So keep in mind when we're talking about available talent and who's available to all industry sectors and what's mining's share of the available talent, that mining's share changes for each of the 66 occupations. We roll the forecast of available talent together into the 6 broad occupational categories that I showed you the hiring requirements for. And we come up with a prediction of how many people are going to be available in each of the occupations and occupation categories over the next 10 years. These forecasts assume that the current rates of entry into the labor market will continue over the next 10 years. So the current rates of graduation and new entrants coming into the labor market, current rates of immigration, current rates of re-entry into the labor market will remain the same over the next 10 years. And as you can see in the left-hand column that shows you mining's share of available talent, the numbers that we're showing here for each of the occupational categories are indeed smaller than what we showed you for the needs. And we'll show you a comparison on an occupation-by-occupation basis in a little bit. So keep in mind that these are all rolled together. The other thing that our available talent forecasts have allowed us to do this year is take a look at labor pool pressures by occupation. So what we're showing you in this chart in colors, in green, yellow, and red, are the relative labor pool pressures. So that's essentially saying, are there going to be more new entrants coming into these occupations over time than what we're currently seeing? So are there going to be gains in the labor pool? Are we going to have a steady state where it's going to stay about the same over the next 10 years? Or are we going to see losses in the labor pool? So there's fewer new entrants coming into these occupations over time than what we're currently seeing. So we call that labor pool growing or the labor pool shrinking over time. So for each occupation that you see here, if they're in green, the labor pool is intended to grow over the time. If they're in red, the labor pool is expected to shrink over time. There'll be fewer new entrants coming in. The other dimension that we plotted on here on the vertical is how mining specific are those occupations. What proportion of new entrants, what proportion of mining's share of new entrants is higher. The higher up you go, the more bold the color becomes on the chart. So when you get to the top level, you have very mining-specific occupations. So in the dark green, dark yellow, and dark red, we're looking at highly mining-specific occupations. So we're expecting growth in some labor pools and shrinkage in other over time. Another trend that you notice when you look through these columns is that a trend that we're seeing in the Canadian labor market as a whole, that occupations that require university-level education or higher tend to be in the green stripe, where we're expected to see gains in the labor pools. Occupations that require college or university certificate type of program tend to be in the yellow, and occupations that require minimum high school education or 1 or 2 years of college training tend to be in the red stripe. This is indicative of something going on in the Canadian labor market as a whole. More young people are tending to flock towards a university education. Fewer young people are coming straight out of high school and going into the labor market. So not only are we going to do a side-by-side comparison of the needs for each of the occupations and the available talent for each of the occupations, but we're going to do an analysis that looks at whether that labor pool is expected to grow or shrink over time. when we do that in our gap analysis, we see several trends develop. In fact, there are 3 trends that develop when we do this analysis. So what I'm showing you here is a gap table for 5 of the 66 occupations. I won't go through the whole 66 in this webinar. We're just going to look at these 5 as an example of what the table shows. But the table that we have in our forecasting report does indeed cover all 66 of the occupations that we track. So we're showing you here the need or the cumulative hiring requirement for each of these occupations on the left compared to who's going to be available for mining, so mining share of available talent. And then simple math gives us a gap. And as you can see, for these 5 occupations, the gap is always negative. Our needs are going to exceed who's going to be available. The next thing we do is, under the challenge, we're taking a look at what those labor pool pressures look like. So how many people in these occupations are available to all industry sector? What has mining share for these occupations traditionally been? And then for each broad occupational category, we look at what will mining share need to be in the future moving forward. So again, for these occupations, we're expecting a shortfall, but that's not true of all of the occupations. And this is where we see 3 different trends emerging over time. And the first trend that we see, the need, which is plotted here as the orange square, so that's the cumulative hiring requirement for each for the occupation, will be within mining's predicted share of available talent. So that's your dark blue bar in front of you. Also shown in front of you in light blue is who's going to be available to all industries except mining, so everybody else. And then in white, it's because of the way the graph's broken up and plotted, we're showing you in white the total number of people who will be available, new entrants coming in to that occupation. So that's the red arrow from before. So in these cases, for these particular occupations, our needs are just within mining share. We're not saying here that for these kinds of occupations, it's time to just don't worry about them, focus on the other ones, we're going to be fine. What we're saying here is if we continue our current level of effort, don't take our foot off the gas for these occupations. Have the same predicted number of folks coming out of education and training, same level of new entrants coming into the labor market over time, then this is what the gap looks like over the next 10 years. If we suddenly forgot about one of these occupations or did something somehow discourage individuals from the mining industry in these occupations, then we'll quickly see this trend change. So what we say here is focus on retention, keep the people that we currently have engaged in the industry, focus on key talent groups here, and focus on their development into the future. And that will ensure that we'll be comfortable when it comes to these occupations. It's also worth noting here that the types of occupations that you see in this type of gap are folks with broad university education. There are professional and physical sciences occupations. Broad university level education, highly transferable skill set, and are quite a flight risk in the industry when times get tough. They can take that skill set somewhere else, find employment somewhere else, and are traditionally reluctant to come back when economic conditions improve in the industry. So that's a pattern we've seen over time with our knowledge workers, and one to keep in mind in the current climate and current conditions. That focus on retention of these individuals will be an important part of the strategy over the next 10 years. The second trend that we see is one where the need or the hiring requirement in orange exceeds who we're predicting will be available to the mining industry over the next 10 years in that occupation. So it's outside of the blue line this time, the dark blue this time. But it is well within who's going to be available to all other industry sectors. So in this case, the challenge is a little bit different for the industry. We're talking about a need to increase mining share of the talent for these occupations. So we want to increase the proportion of new entrants who come into our sector. So just for example, heavy equipment operators traditionally trend themselves towards occupations in the construction industry or oil and gas. So if the mining industry is going to meet its needs over time, we're going to have to attract some of those new entrants away from other industry sectors where they would traditionally or typically find themselves looking for work. The proportion of individuals coming into the labor market who are attracted to one industry sector over another tends to be very stable over time. So if you look back over the last 20 or 30 years, the proportion of people who are attracted to mining for each of these occupations tends to be very stable. So in this condition, we're talking about the industry working as a whole, as a group, in efforts to attract, like career awareness and outreach campaign would be one example of a way to attract individuals in each of these occupations away from other industry sectors. The other trend that I'll highlight here for you is that the occupations that are listed here tend to be your technologists and technicians and your heavy equipment operators and excuse me, heavy equipment operators in the industry. So it's a significant challenge ahead, and when the mining industry bands together and starts career awareness and outreach campaign for folks in heavy-duty equipment mechanics, for example, you can be assured that the construction and the petroleum or oil and gas industries will return in kind. It's going to be very difficult for a company-by-company basis to make a difference here. But if the industry works together, we do stand a chance of increasing mining's share of talent in these occupations. The third trend that we see, and the final trend that we see in the occupation analysis, is where the needs or the hiring requirements exceed who's going to be available for all industries, never mind just mining, all industries combined. So in these cases, within a margin of error. So with these cases, there simply aren't going to be enough new entrants coming into the labor market at all to meet the needs. These are also the occupations that you saw that have shrinking labor pools, which is lending itself to this trend pattern. So in this case, we need to stop the shrinkage of the labor pool. We need to grow that labor pool overall. This requires coordinated efforts with all levels of government and industry and education and training to meet these needs. Everybody needs to do their part, come together in a coordinated fashion to grow a talent pool overall. So the other thing I'll highlight here too for you is there's two categories of occupations that fall on a national scale into this scenario. Occupations that are highly mining specific and production level occupations, so underground production and development miners, for example, underground service and support workers, and some of the machine operator occupations in mineral and metal processing. The other types of occupations that we see here are midline management, supervisory, and early leadership occupations. So your supervisors and foremen fall into these categories. So in this case, you're not just looking at efforts to grow a talent pool for production level occupations, but you're also looking at succession planning carefully and making sure that you're nurturing your midline management and you're developing your early leaders over the next little while, because there'll be significant ones to try to replace later. So just as a wrap-up, when we're looking at the 3 different gap trends that we showed you and all the numbers, the hiring requirements, and the available talent, we can boil it down to some broad-level strategies for addressing the gaps and moving forward. So to recap, we need a multifaceted approach. There isn't one approach that's going to address conditions for all of the occupations. They fall into these different types of gaps and categories, so we need a multifaceted approach to address the hiring requirements moving forward. So working with industry to promote careers in mining to young people, to Aboriginal people, better engaging Aboriginal people in the industry in terms of types of occupations that they're engaged in. And also improving diversity and inclusion for women and immigrants in the industry, and encouraging women and immigrants into the industry will be important solution strategies. Coordinating and expanding our initiatives as an industry with government and education and training providers, making sure that industry employers are also engaged and coming to the table and doing their part. And working with other associations and groups that are interested in the labor market to ensure that we're growing the labor pool for those key occupations where we're seeing shrinkage of new entrants over time. And finally, in all cases, the industry needs to keep its efforts, keep the foot on the gas in terms of making the best possible use of all the talent that we already have engaged in the industry, retaining our workforce that we have now. Something we didn't talk about too much in the gap analysis just now, but we do talk about it in the report, is efforts to include and retain our mature workers. If we can reduce the predicted hiring requirement for replacing our retiring workers, it will go a long way to meeting our needs in the future. So trying to retain and re-engage our mature workers. And then also re-engage with our retired workforce. Retirement at 59 means that the person has, young and healthy enough to continue working in the industry in some capacity. So maybe redefining what it means to retire and redefining how we engage with the retired workforce, bringing them back in to fill some of the gaps. So thank you very much for joining us today. For more information and discussion, you can refer to the website in front of you, mininghrforecast.ca. On this website, you'll find a space where you can download the full report if you want the full 65 pages and all the reading. The other thing you can do on this website, which is new this year, is you can go through page by page. So the website's structured as a living document. So the report is all laid out on the website. And you can go through page by page and you can choose portions of the report that you want to download and create your own report out of it. So if you're looking for segments of what I talked about today for your own discussions internally or for your own planning purposes, but you don't want the whole 65 pages, you can download your own Coles Notes version with the pieces that you're interested in. You can also contact us anytime for more information, so I've got my contact information there for you, but you can either call or email, and we'll certainly get back to you quickly if you have a request. We also do customized analysis and individual consulting, so if you have needs in those areas or ideas that you'd like to bounce around with me, please do feel free to contact me anytime. So we have a few minutes left on the webinar, and I'll open the floor if there's any other questions that came in. I'm just taking a quick look, and I don't see any new questions that came in. So if any questions come up afterwards, or if you didn't have a chance to type and we close the webinar too quickly on you, certainly feel free to give us a call or send us an email. So once again, thank you for your time and attention today. We certainly look forward to talking with you in the near future and hearing about your needs in Atlantic Canada and how they related to the national forecast that we showed you today. So thank you.